I was 12 years old when I first noticed the cracks in my parents' marriage. They were in their mid-30s and they had married young. We'd just moved back to Los Angeles from Alaska when my father got out of the military and we were living in his childhood home. I hadn't paid attention to the occasional argument, often fueled by alcohol, but I was starting to learn that all couples didn't get along, and more, that sometimes they could be pretty awful to each other. My father started to rage and yell, and my mother would cry and be silent, often for days. It was the worst of worlds for me because I started to fear my father and resent my mother. They didn't break up until I was 17, but by then the cracks were a chasm. They said they loved each other, but they just couldn't stay together, and my teen brain didn't know what to do with that. As I entered into my adult life, I tried to figure out how to make a relationship work. I didn't find it. I'd sometimes pick the wrong person, and at other times, I would do what I thought needed to be done to show somebody what I thought was love. I just kept making mistakes over and over. I went into the Army to get away from home. I lived in Europe for several years. I completed a degree in psychology, and I found a love for research science that was my path. In the midst of all this, I made a disastrous first marriage. It only lasted 7 months. He was definitely the wrong person. I entered grad school, and I met my second husband, another scientist. While this one lasted a while longer, we still ended up getting divorced. It was a victim. That marriage was a victim of our ineptitude. I came back to California, and I became a professor, and I watched as my academic life kept expanding outward. But my personal life just continued to be a series of missteps and deep hurts. It took me many more failures and many years to find out that it wasn't just something that was inherently wrong with me. The fact is, there is no secret. We don't get good relationship education, any of us. We observe our parents or relatives or maybe our neighbors' relationships, and we can only imagine what goes on in there. And yet we're expected to figure it out ourselves and make it work. I became determined to find out how to make a relationship work. I started reading books and books on relationships, and I was actually excited to find out that relationships go through predictable stages. I saw where I was getting stuck, and I found a roadmap forward. Dr. Ellen Bader and Pete Pearson, the founders of the Couples Institute in Menlo Park, California, described their developmental model as a way of relating in their first book called In Quest of the Mythical Mate. In the first stage, couples feel like they are one. They minimize their differences, and they bask in this couple bubble and a rush of hormones that usually accompanies a feeling of love. This bonding or honeymoon stage is very important for what comes later, but it can't last. Eventually, we all have to move into the second stage they call differentiation. And this represents the struggle to be a couple and two separate people. Couples start to notice their differences, and this creates a challenge. Noticing them can create anxiety and also fear that I just haven't picked the right person. They begin to find strategies to stay away from those differences. Some couples will avoid or ignore their differences. They're the ones that tell me that they never fight. Yet there's something of a dead quality to their relationships, like the energy has just been drained out of it. They're trying to get back to that bubble, but they can't, and they get stuck. On the other side, there's couples who, I think you've seen them at parties, they argue and they snipe, and you wonder, how can they even stay together? Interestingly, they're also fighting to get back to that bubble. Do you recognize yourself at all? I certainly did. I thought that the relationship was the bubble. Every time I'd start to lose that sense of oneness with someone, I'd start to panic, and I'd try to do things to hold on to that thing I thought was love. Or I just fled. I didn't realize that I had to grow and change. Now, is there a way through? Yes, and I'm going to share some developmental ideas and steps with you that may seem counterintuitive at first. First, this isn't about the other person. As I learned from my mentor, Pete Pearson, the only person you can change is yourself. You have to take an honest look at yourself. Do you argue or avoid? Do you minimize, plead, people please, demand to be right, or threaten to leave? Do you get fixated on the thoughts and behaviors of the other person in an attempt to try to fix them or control them? Do you withdraw and stonewall and refuse risking coming forward? This kind of thinking is a trap. It only serves to protect you, not connect you. Next, you're going to have to decide if you're willing to risk a change. This means creating goals for yourself, generating the motivation to reach those goals, and the courage to try new ways of relating. Now, think a little deeper maybe than you might have before in this moment. I have a big question for you. What kind of relationship would you like to co-create? Do you want a happy one? Well, what does happy look like? Do you want one that's easygoing, affectionate, loving, caring? Do you want one where you value and respect each other? Get specific. This is your vision. This provides you with a North Star. From here, you are going to be ready to take some important next steps. Another important question. To reach your goals, what will be required of you? What is the kind of partner you aspire to be? We have to have a stable I to be able to have a successful we. The more we take these steps, the more motivated we'll be because we'll start to realize and be closer and closer to the person we want to be close with. We'll feel confident, we'll feel complete, and then the we and I can coexist and grow strong. But wait. You might ask, how is this possible? Some of you may not have been very successful at relationships before. But I'm betting that all of you have experienced love, respect, appreciation in your life. So let me take a moment here and just have you do something Dr. Elliott Connie, who is a couples and relationship therapist, calls the reverse miracle question. Think back to a time in your life when you felt love. It could have been the love you felt for another person, or it could have been for an animal. It could have been the love that you received. These kinds of questions will help you get clearer about outcomes of encounters from your past. How did love show up? Did it make an impact in your life? Did it make a difference? You have more skills in you than you know, and you can use these to apply to your relationships today. I did find the way. I do have a successful and loving, connected relationship. I found out how to do it, and it wasn't a secret. I had to be willing to look at myself deeply, and I had to be willing to commit to the changes, and I had to be willing to practice those skills every day. My partner and I have been together 18 years now, and there have been struggles, but we continue to be committed to connecting and growing. We've made a conscious commitment to embodying the kinds of attributes and values I talked about earlier. So no matter how many times you've tried and failed, no matter where you are in your relationships today, there is hope, there is healing, there is happiness. Thank you.